All right, folks, it is 12:30, time to start. Quite a few people haven't shown up yet, so they're going to be showing up eventually. Okay, so what we're going to do today is talk about a little bit about jigs that are used in woodworking and how we're using a homemade jig to do the roll-up timbre door in this project. What we have in front of us here on the screen, zoom in on it just a little bit, is a jig that we're using to create the timbre doors, okay? And it consists of the following things. Let's take a look at it. Well, let's show you how they ask us to put it together first. We'll pull up the plans here, that might help a little bit. Come on. All right, so this project actually has three separate sets of plans to complete it. The first one is how to create this jig. And a jig is nothing more than something you build, something you buy that assists you in a specific process. Might make it easier, it might make it more accurate. And we use a lot of jigs in this shop. So that's really what this is. This is their timbre assembly jig. And it consists of the following things: a base piece of material that's 32 inches wide, 36 inches long. It's got a fixed stop, is what they call it. A strip of wood that's 2.5 inches wide and 1/2 inch thick. And that's attached with screws to the base right flush at the edge, okay? Then we have one of these, well, we started with the fixed cleat on the left-hand side. And the cleat is basically this little guy right here, okay? It's got a rabbet that is 3/4 of an inch wide and 1/2 inch deep. Now, all these 1/2 inch measurements, like the thickness of this fixed stop, the thickness of this end stop, the height of this rabbet, all come into play because all of our slats, all of our timbre slats are 1/2 inch thick, and you'll see what I mean here in a second, okay? So what we've done is we've got the base together, we've got this fixed stop down here, and we have this fixed cleat attached. We don't have the canvas cleat yet. We don't have well, we have the end stop, but it's not necessary yet. And then the removable cleat is the one we have that's held on with clamps right now. And that is what we have right here. This is the removable cleat right here. This is the fixed cleat. This is the end stop. I'm sorry, the fixed stop, and the end stop is down here. Hold on, I got somebody coming in late. Okay, so let's take a look at this jig. So right now I have 40 slats, 40 of these timbre slats sitting in the jig. And in all reality, this literally looks like a solid piece of wood. There's no gaps, which is fantastic. When we go to put glue on the back of this guy, we shouldn't have any seepage through the gaps or through any joints onto the table. We don't want to glue this to the table. That's one of the reasons I use this material. It's called melamine. It's basically a PVC plastic coated particle board, and glue doesn't stick to this stuff. It's the same thing our bench tops are made out of here. Glue doesn't really stick to it. You can get it off real easy, okay? So the reason these clamps are here is because of the warpage in these boards. They do move a little bit once you cut them, okay? So this holds the boards nice and snug together. And then these guys, the way this works, it's pretty slick actually. This is the removable cleat. And you can see the rabbet we cut, the channel we cut in here. And the reason for that is, these are really in there, it's because the ends of these individual timbre slats are going to fit underneath in that rabbet to keep these things from rolling when we're getting ready to glue it up, okay? So we have 40 different tambour slats here. And some of them are stuck in there pretty good, which is what we want. We want to be a snug fit. And this is basically the jig setup that we have. Make this tambour door. And this is one of those things, a lot of times we'll set up a jig and use it one time and toss it. Sometimes we don't keep them. But often when it's something like this, that this project itself has been done a couple times in the class. And one of the more difficult aspects of it is this tambour door glue up. And so this is one of those jigs that we'll keep. We'll hang on our wall over here or store it somewhere so that next time somebody wants to do this same project, they won't have to go through the process of remaking this jig. So you can actually see the little rabbet under here that each of these parts slide into. Basically the rounded face of it goes down and this slides right into that cleat. The rest of them get stacked up on it. The removable cleat can go in place. Then some clamps will pull on these tight together. This end stop, once these are pulled tight together, will get screwed right down here. And then we can start the canvas application. So we have a lot of different jigs in this shop, a lot. Some of them we've purchased. Oh, I got somebody coming in late again. Some we've made, some we've purchased. I don't know if I can get the camera over to that one, but let's see. This one's hanging on the wall over there. I think the nightstand might be in the way, but I can move it real quick. I'm going to set those on the floor real quick so you guys can see this. Actually, yeah, I'll just set them on the floor. So what we have over here against this wall are some of our jigs. Most are templates. A template is, I guess you could say it's kind of similar to a jig, but not really. It does assist you in making things or repeatedly making accurate parts. But for example, over here, right, that's the wrong way, Brandon. Right there, this little guy, and that's the wrong way again. Now they have commercially available. You can buy these things in stores or in woodworking stores. But this plastic guy right here, this acrylic guy right here is a shelf pin drilling jig. So it's got evenly spaced holes right along here and right here that allow you to drill holes for shelf pins for adjustable shelves. The reason there's tape all over it is because students will sometimes want a specific spacing of shelf locations, and they'll tape off every other hole or every third hole or every fourth hole or something like that because they don't want to drill into those holes. So this is very easily set up to drill shelf pin holes. You'll see a bunch of templates over here. A lot of these are Adirondack chair templates. That's just a piece of outdoor furniture. This has been around a long time. This was a hanging gun rack template. This is the leg for a coat rack that needs 4 legs. There's all sorts of templates and stuff like that over here. And you come over here a little further, and on our cabinet doors are all the templates we have for Adirondack chairs. All of these templates were cut out on the CNC. They're accurate. They're always going to be the same. They're never going to change. That CNC is going to work just great on things like that. Over here, you'll see some jigs stacked right here. These are basically for gluing up the sides of an acoustic guitar. Okay, you can see the shape of the acoustic guitar. These two clampy things is the best word I can come up with for it. Get popped out, sides get put in place, and these come in and hold the sides of the guitar body snug inside the jig. So we've got some of those. This is actually a jig right here with a 20-foot radius dish. I don't know if you can see it, but it's got a dish to it, a dip in it. A lot of guitars have a shaped back or shaped front of the guitar. So these things are adhesive back sandpaper. They get dropped in there, stuck down there. So when you go to sand it, it maintains a 20-foot radius on the back of an acoustic guitar. Actually, it's the way the sides are sanded to shape it to that. There's a lot of different jigs or things like that. Over here, let's come back over here. I'm going to zoom out because it tends to go slower when it's zoomed out, and that's going to go right over my head. Come on. So here's a small assortment of little jigs. Some of them we use regularly, some of them we'll just use from time to time. But what you'll see here, if I can zoom in on it. Okay, for example, start with the simplest of them. Okay, this is an acrylic add-on to a router. This happens to be a fixed base router. And it's got a little movable pin right here that can slide along this channel. Okay, and what this is a circle cutting jig. So basically what you do is you measure, say you want a 12-inch radius circle. Say you're making a sub box for a subwoofer in a car. Okay, all you have to do is measure the distance, set that pin so it's 12 inches from the outside of the bit. There might even be a hole here I can put it in. Then all it is at the very center of your circle, you drill a small hole that this pin will fit into. Now you've got a pivot, and a perfect 12-inch radius for a 12-inch subwoofer. Okay, so that's a inexpensive. We can actually make these in the laser cutter, but we bought this a long time ago before we ever got the laser cutter. It's used not frequently, but when we need it, really need it. Okay. But the circle cutting tool. This is a new addition to our shop. Like a little difficult to see, but basically what this is, and that's taped in there, I'm going to get it out of there. This allows us to make our own guitar fretboards. Okay, I'm going to grab a fretboard and see how this works. And we have the saw that's used in it. So this allows us to make our own fretboards. We haven't been able to do up till now. So what we have is a channel in here that a fretboard slides into. Okay, and these fretboards that we have, the ones we buy, they're already tapered. So in other words, this has a taper to it. It's wider at the bottom than the top. But when we make our own fretboards, it'll just be a flat rectangle. There won't be a taper to it until we've already cut the fret slots. So this allows you to bring this in, clamp it down into the jig, now what we have is there's another part to this jig that indexes all of these. In other words, so that all the fret slots are placed in the proper location. I haven't used this yet. I'm looking forward to using it. This is actually the saw that we use. It's called a Kozuki. It's a Japanese full saw. We actually have quite a few of these around here. They're great little saws. But what's going to end up happening is once this fretboard is indexed in the right spot, this saw, these little guys, these little bearings, guide this saw cut in exactly the right spot for the fretboard. So we make our own fretboard. There's a lot of moving parts to that can take a little while to figure out. But that's our fretboard jig. This happens to be, and I'm going to move this camera over the table saw because the next couple jigs, this camera has been freaking out today, taking off in weird direction. All right, so here is called box joint. Okay, and this guy works. We used to make our own box joint jigs. The way this works, it slides into a miter gauge slot. Okay, there's a ton of adjustments that have to happen for this to work. But a box joint is nothing more than a finger joint. In other words, it looks like a bunch of little fingers locked together in the corner. And this is the jig that allows us to make those and make them very accurately. It's got a micro adjustment here on the end that really lets you dial in joints perfectly. Everything just, once you're set up, you can sit here and make box joints all day long. It's a fantastic little jig. We've had it for a little while. We've used it a few times. And it's really, really a nice little jig. So that's our box joint jig. This is our, we use this quite a lot. This is our tenon jig. Okay? Show you how this works. So it locks in the miter gauge slot. You have to take the riving knife off in order to use this because it's not cutting all the way through a board. But it's safe because the board is the tenon is nothing more than a square peg that fits into a square hole. Okay, we have a mortise in this, that's the mortise, that's the square hole. Tenoning jig. So basically, once we know how long our tenon is supposed to be, let's say this thing's supposed to be 1.5 inches long tenon. We'll make a mark here, 1.5 inches. Draw a line. Let's say the thickness of the tenon is supposed to be, I don't know how thick this board is right now. It's almost 1 inch thick. Let's say we're going to make a tenon that's about 1/2 inch thick. We're going to mark both sides of the tenon. Now we know the thickness of the tenon. We know the length of the tenon. So we set the blade height to the length of the tenon. Raise the blade up, right to the line. And we're going to set this in the jig, lock it down. This holds the board at 90 degrees this way and this way. So it holds it 90 degrees that way and that way. So it's nice and perfect. Then all we have to do, unlock the bed, bring it up, slide it in. That's a snug fit. And we can adjust where it cuts our tenon. Like that. And all we have to do take it off, turn it around. So what we basically just cut right there are the cheeks of our tenon. Okay? The faces of the tenon are called the cheeks. I guess that kind of makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. So we've got the cheeks cut. So So in order to trim those off, you just take a miter gauge, clean out that miter slot from all the sides. We need one more thing. We want to be consistent in how we trim these pieces off. So we take a temporary stop block, clamp it in place. Now what we have to do, we're going to drop our blade back down. So it just cuts through that piece. We're going to take it and we're going to line it up with our pencil mark for the length of the tinning. Bring our fence over. Now we're set. Cut the cheeks off these tenons all day long. And we have a tenon, pretty darn quick and easy. Okay, works great. The only other cuts we still have to make are the shoulder cuts. These guys right here will be trimmed off. And that's how we make a tenon with a tenon. Okay, so we have some others that you've already seen that we use all the time. I mean, almost on a daily basis. And that would be these guys. I'm going to get that dust out of those miter slots. Right. Get it out of there. All right. That's better. So for following things, we need to have the riving knife back in place because we will be cutting all the way through something. And basically, you cannot use this riving knife if you're not cutting through the board. This riving knife would stop the board. There's a couple of different things here. First off is the one we use to make the miter cuts of the drawer trim for this cabinet. And this is actually, I would say it's more accurate than our miter saw. It's a great little addition. And I'm just trying to find a board here that I can use for example. This looks fine. So if you were making a picture frame, something like that. All right, all we have to do, hold it snug. And we've got pretty straightforward, pretty simple, the 45-degree cuts, or miter cuts as they're called, for a picture frame. Okay, nice, very accurate jig. This was one we made ourselves. The only thing we bought were the traps that slide in the miter slots. We have what's called a cutoff sled. Another one we made ourselves. It's going to be difficult for you to see, but this allows us to cross-cut wider boards on the table saw. So if we've got a fairly wide board that's too wide for a miter gauge, we can use this to cut them off on the table saw. This is one you would have used had you been here to trim the top of your nightstand to final size. We would use this little jig to do that. Okay. What else is in here for jigs? Well, this is sort of a jig. It's called a magnetic feather board. So basically, it's a feather board. What a feather board's used for is this sort of thing. Let's say you're ripping a board, and it's a situation where you're going to have a difficult time holding your board tight to the fence with your left hand. Let's say you want your left hand free to do other things. Basically what you do is you set your board against the fence, push this tight against your board, twist those little guys. They're magnetic. Now they're going to hold your material tight to the fence without the need for your left hand to be there pushing it against the fence. So it's a magnetic feather board. I guess you call that a jig. I don't know if you call it jig for sure. Okay. Here's an interesting little guy. There are 1,000 different jigs for guitar making. Boatloads of jigs for guitar making. In fact, we don't even have a portion of the jigs we need for guitar making. I'll just do this today. So this is for an acoustic guitar. They always have what's called a rosette. In other words, where the sound hole is on an acoustic guitar. Here, I can show it to you. I've got one here. Grab it. So this is a top for an acoustic guitar that we're getting ready to build. And this is the rosette around the sound hole. It's a piece of spruce at the top. You can see this decorative rosette. It's inlaid around the sound hole. Okay, this is the little jig that allows you to do that. Okay, basically we have a little mount that mounts a Dremel. You guys know what a Dremel is, those little Dremel tools onto this. Your radius is controlled by this little guy. There will be a pin in this little brass bushing that allows you to set this in place. That pin will be centered in the middle of the sound hole. This hole wouldn't be here. This would still be a solid piece. We end up cutting the sound hole out later. And that allows you to rotate the Dremel around and cut the channel necessary to inlay this banding for the sound hole, for the rosette. Another nice little jig here. It's kind of funky looking. This will also route specific radiuses that are necessary on a guitar. The cool thing about this one is the Dremel mounts in here. This is a spring-loaded plunge, and if I can get the plunge, it should plunge. I don't know why she's not plunging. But she should. Let's just round up a little bit. Okay, plunges down. So you mount a Dremel right in here. You can plunge the bit down into the work, lock it in place. It's actually got, I don't know if you can see it or not. See if it'll even turn on. Where does it turn on? Right there. It's got a little light, so it really helps you see what you're doing when you're doing. A lot of times this is used for routing the recesses for inlays in a fretboard and things like that. And you really get a very, very precise, some very precise work. And if you're doing it by hand, this is what you use. Okay, so it's got a little light, charged by USB. It dims a little bit, which is kind of cool. Turn it off. You gotta hold it maybe. Huh. There it goes. You gotta hold it for a second. And finally, this is another Dremel jig that is used for the binding that gets inlaid around the outer edges of the guitar. That's why it's got this little guy here. This is adjustable. Okay, you can move this in and out. This is a guide. So this would allow you to place the Dremel in here. And once the top and the back are mounted on the sides of the guitar, this is going to follow the side and allow you to route those channels that are necessary to place the binding, the colored or plastic pieces that go around the outer edge of the guitar. So that's what this is, the binding routing jig. This actually has a little connection right here for a hose, and then a little pump like for a fish tank. And it will actually sit there and pump, and that little hose, it'll blow the sawdust off your work area, so you don't have to sit there and blow it off or brush it off. You can keep working and it blows the sawdust out of the way. So those are some of the jigs we have around here. That's just I mean, there's way more than I could ever pull out here and show you guys, but I want to let you know, because this tambour door is going to get glued up during second period tomorrow. It was their project and they wanted to see this glue up process. So I'm holding off doing the glue up. I could do it right now or fourth period, but I wanted to hold off and let those guys see the gluing process, because a couple of the students have done this project before in my third period class or second period class, and they wanted to see it done with this particular jig. So they're going to get to see it tomorrow, and then by the time you guys get here tomorrow, I don't know if it'll be dry yet or not. We'll figure something out. Okay. So that's pretty much all I have for today. If you would please get your name in the chat window. Thank you for being here today. Please try to be on time. It's Friday tomorrow. Thank goodness we got Friday off. Take care of yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. No, you do not have Friday off. For some reason, people keep thinking you have Friday off because the elementary schools have it off. We don't. We got to be here Friday. Okay, Micah? Good question.